Hi, my name is Maggie DeWitty, Executive Director for Pulse Life Advocates. Pulse is Iowa's original pro-life organization, defending life from fertilization till natural death since 1972. We asked moms and dads, husbands and wives, clergy and laity, and saints and sinners two simple questions. How do you raise pro-life children? Or, how did your parents raise you to become pro-life? How do you raise pro-life children? In episode 1 of this series, we show how it begins with faith in God and an active prayer life. In episode 2, our guests make the case that you must trust in God, to not be afraid, and to use the prophetic gifts God gives you. Episode 3 talks about the importance of the unique roles of the dad and mom. And this one looks at the importance of attending the March for Life and pro-life events. Most of the moms and dads you've heard in this series talk to their kids about life issues starting at a young age, and they have modeled their faith in their busy daily lives. But many went even further by actively including their children in pro-life events like the March for Life and praying in front of Planned Parenthood, like Jeannie and Bo Bishop.
We just were wanting to respond to the question of ideas about raising pro-life children, and thinking back to things in our family that we did when our kids were growing up. One of the first things that we thought of was bringing our kids to pro-life functions, and I think kind of twofold: one, hearing speakers on the issue, different perspectives, people coming from all walks of life and speaking to the pro-life cause. The other thing would be praying in front of Planned Parenthood and really being aware of what a peaceful and important presence we were there. Anyone is there.
I think we also talked about the issue at home, depending on the age of the kids.
Another way we were blessed was to attend the March for Life, and Bo and I and all 6 of our kids went multiple times, and I think it was really positive for our kids to see what a peaceful, joyful, huge movement we were a part of. Mm-hmm. And also to see how the secular press described it, which was often very different, always almost very different from what they in fact experienced for themselves. And I think that was quite educational for all of us, but especially for young people.
Yeah. It was helpful, too, that some of their friends went on that March for Life, and we had a lot of our families that we spent a lot of time with were on the same page with us regarding moral issues. And so the families, the friends that we spent time with, adults and their children, we talked about it amongst other families, and our kids were exposed to other families' strength in the pro-life movement with things that they did and ideas that they had and beliefs that they held.
What did my husband Quint and I do to raise pro-life children? I'll let my daughter Abby tell you herself.
My parents raised me pro-life by exposing me to a really pro-life community, by taking me to events and having me pray in front of Planned Parenthood or going to the March for Life and all that kind of stuff. It really helped me understand what being pro-life meant. And they also were really open to questions about whenever I was confused about what we stood for or what abortion really was. They always helped me to understand anything that I asked.
Beth Dalkey builds on this theme as she describes what her dad did for her.
My dad took me twice to Washington, D.C., to the March for Life. He was kind of on a mission, and he brought us to the March for Life. He marched with us. This was in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And we just were like, wow, this is something else. And it really planted that seed. When an abortion clinic opened up in our town, he was there praying the rosary. And I was probably in my teens when we went out and we prayed the rosary. So there's instilled in me always that hope and faith and love for life. And that's how my parents made me pro-life.
Suppose this happens to your child at college. A liberal, pro-abortion professor says all you pro-lifers go in this corner, and all you pro-choicers go in the other corner. And suppose your child was the only one in the pro-life corner. And then the professor says, defend your position. Well, that's exactly what happened to one of Chris Magruder's children. And he was prepared because he had attended some Pulse events. Here was my conversation with Chris.
One of my kids actually, in an English classroom in college, the pro-life thing came up. And the professor said, okay, those of you that are pro-life, go to that corner. And those of you that are pro-choice, go to that corner. And my child was the only one in the pro-life corner. And he had to defend himself. And we had no idea this happened until a couple months later. We're sitting down, at a brunch one time after church. And he starts telling us, we're like, what? Shocked. And the things that he said to defend it, I'm like, where did you learn that? Because honestly, I'm like, it was because he had done his own research when he had gone off to college and people had challenged him. And he's like, I know it's right. I don't know the answers. So praise God, I guess. I can't take a lot of credit.
Well, yes, you can. And that's really affirming, though, to know that, when you said your children did their own research, and that's what Pulse is all about, is providing that information. So I hope that in some way affirms what we're doing in the pro-life movement. Everybody has their part in terms of pregnancy centers and lobbying and legislation, and then the educational part, because we do need to equip others to spread the message and to be able to defend it. Mm-hmm. And that's what Pulse is about. So I appreciate hearing that maybe in some small way, we were able to help inform through some of that research that they did on their own.
Well, and I will tell you, at least for two of my kids, they would definitely say that they got a lot of information from you, and going just to your dinners. When you would have the annual dinners, they would go and they would hear stuff from you and from Tom Quiner. A lot of times the main speaker would say things that they hadn't heard before. So yeah, definitely. At least two of them would say that that's true.
In my experience, nothing lights a fire in youth for the pro-life cause more than the March for Life in Washington, D.C. I've taken more than 1,000 students to the march over the past decade, and it's more than a game changer. It's a life changer. Watch this clip to get a feel for the energy generated by this life-changing event.
I plead your blood over my sins and the sins of my nation. End abortion, send revival. Jesus, I plead your blood over my sins and the sins of my nation. End abortion, send revival. Over my sins and the sins of my nation. God, end abortion, send revival to America.
A few years ago, when Pulse was still known as Iowans for Life, we gathered together young and old participants who had attended the march to share their experience on the march. Here's what we all had to say.
I want to welcome you to the 46th Annual March for Life, the largest annual human rights demonstration in the world.
When I found out 1/3 of my generation was wiped out through abortion, it made me feel like desolate. It's not right that the only generation to not know that suffering is the one wiping out the next generation.
And we will march until that darkness is banished forever and all of our children can stand together.
I was very much into the right of a woman to choose what she wants to do with her body until I heard my son's heartbeat. From that point on, there's no going back.
Well, I believe the sanctity of life. If you've ever had a child and you have birthed that child and you've counted their 10 fingers and their 10 toes, and you recognize at that instant that this is a creature created by God, how could you ever consider ending the birth of that child?
This became an issue to me when it became a political issue in the late 1970s. It struck me that abortion was immoral. Therefore, it was unjust, and my consciousness was raised by it. I became pro-life. Ronald Reagan said something amazing that had an impact on me. He said, I notice the only people who are for abortion have already been born. Now, does that make sense or what? It had quite an impact on me.
90% of women who receive a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome opt abortion, and that's a devastating statistic for our country. Research is so important, and that's a big part of what we do at Iowans for Life, is we share information and we educate Iowans on this important issue of life.
I've been raised pro-life and never really looked back on it. I think research and listening to people's stories really helps, especially the other side, to come over and be pro-life. The Declaration of Independence guarantees the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, so we must defend life.
It was still cool to see that many people that were pro-life and to pray a rosary with them, and to see that many religious, like sisters and brothers and priests and deacons, and they all processed in.
I think the value of going on the March for Life as a pilgrimage is the incorporation of prayer throughout the march, and not just the march itself. Those opportunities, all led by the youth, brings it back to what is the root and the importance of any position that we take, and that is that it is rooted in Christ.
It was quite a pilgrimage to go to this event because we're going from Des Moines, Iowa to Washington, D.C. in winter. It's cold, it's unpleasant. It was exciting to be surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people who loved a human being from conception and who loved God. It was a very faith-filled audience of people who were on fire for this cause.
Oftentimes we feel alone in the pro-life movement. Not when you go to the March for Life, when you're surrounded by 500,000 people that feel the same way as you do, that life is important and life is valuable.
To see youth who believed in women and believed in helping women, but also believed in saving children involved in the community. And Iowans for Life is one way to do that. They not only go to the Capitol and talk to our politicians, but they also have a booth at the Iowa State Fair, and they're always looking for volunteers.
Human abortion is a tremendous evil. We can't sit the sidelines. We need more good men and good women to step forward to help stem the tide of evil.
People of all different faith backgrounds, all ages, all denominations, all coming together for this one cause, the sanctity of life. So how do you raise pro-life children? You've heard from a wide range of ages in this series who presented what's worked for them. There's no single approach. In fact, it's best to use a number of approaches. If you don't feel you've been doing a very good job of raising pro-life children so far, please don't despair. Start now. Try to do better. And don't fear failure. Just do the best you can. What you don't realize is you're not alone. Parents everywhere, just like you, are doing their best. And we're all praying for each other. And there's an army of angels and saints praying for us, because this cause, the cause of life, is the most important cause of our age. I'll close this series by quoting the most pro-life president in history. I'm talking about the 26th President of the United States, who called abortion prenatal infanticide. Do you know who I'm talking about? Teddy Roosevelt. In one of the great speeches of the 20th century, one with which pro-lifers can easily relate, he tells us to ignore the critics who harangue pro-lifers unceasingly and to dare greatly. Listen to your friends recite it.
It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena,
whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming.
But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement.
And who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Join Pulse Life advocates in the pro-life arena. If you found this video series helpful, donate to our pro-life educational outreach and help us reach more young people and create new pro-life video content. Go to pulseforlife.org.